Good morning, everyone. My name is Olaleke Lori, and today I'm presenting a class on networking basics. And I'm looking at the OSI and TCP/IP models of network layer. Essentially, networking basic is for us to understand as a cybersecurity expert because if you're going to be protecting something, you need to understand what you're going to be protecting. So I will start by talking about network. What is network? Network is a collection of computers and devices that are connected to enable communication or interconnected devices that share resources and information. Essentially, what we're saying is that we have devices, we have certain things that are coming together to share resources or to exchange information. And essentially, this communication is happening following a certain step by step process. It's following a process. It's happening in layers. Now, this is taking me to discuss what is the OSI and TCP/IP. So, when there's a communication happening within the network, or when two devices are communicating with each other, there's a model with which they communicate. There's a model through which these resources or through which data is being exchanged. Now, OSI stands for the Open System Interconnection. Open System Interconnection is a theoretical foundation for understanding how network communication happens. It's also a framework for reference, which is explaining the transmission of data between two computers. That is, what is happening when I sit down behind my system and I type and compose a message or design a flyer or design a picture and click send and send it to someone at the other hand and the person receive it. So what is happening? What are the processes that are happening? This is what the OSI model tries to explain. And for OSI model, we have 7 layers. That means what happens between when I compose a message and send it to someone on the other hand. There are 7 layers according to the OSI model. We have another model that is called the TCP/IP protocol, which is the transfer control protocol and internet protocol model. So this model has only four. This model is actually older than the OSI model and it is foundational. It has started long before. All layers in the TCP models are needed for transmission as against the OSI model, whereby some of the 7 layers may not be involved in the process of transmission. Now, OSI model the TCP/IP model has 4 layers, so only 4 layers are involved. Now, cybersecurity is the CIA and networking. So, when you're talking about cybersecurity, the fundamental principle of cybersecurity is what we call the CIA triad. And in networking, cybersecurity is ensuring that the communication that is happening between devices on the network is maintaining what we call confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is the CIA. So cybersecurity is ensuring that the information is accessible to only the authorized persons. That is the privacy of the information that's being shared. Cybersecurity is also ensuring that there is an integrity, that is, the data that is being communicated over the network remains intact. Then we have what we call the availability, which means that the person that has the right to a particular information will always be able to access that information anytime it is needed. For example, when you open a website and you see that the website is unreachable, that is unavailability. So cybersecurity ensures that the website or your resources that you are sharing over the network are always available. Now, the OSI and the TCP models in network communication. So there is a relationship between the OSI and the TCP/IP model. So in the OSI model, we have 7 layers. We have the application layer, presentation layer, session layer, transport layer, network layer, data link layer, and the physical layer. And the TCP/IP model, we have the application, transport, network, and the physical layer. So the application presentation and session layer of the ASI model are combined into one layer in TCP, which is the application layer. Then we have the transport layer, the network layer, and then the data link and physical layer of the TCP of the OSI model. They are the ones that form the physical layer. Remember, TCP/IP model is older than the OSI, so it means that what was happening in the TCP model was further broken down to extend into 7 layers. Then, if you look at the use cases on the application layer, we have things like your browsers, your Skype, your Messenger, your Gmail, your Adobe Photoshop. These applications are all what you make use of at the application layer. And then we have in the presentation layer, what is happening there? You have view images in a JPEG, in MPEG, in PNG. These are encryptions and formatting ways of changing data, or formatting your data. Then it means that the data in session layer, the data generator are also used in establishing sessions, and communications. Now, in the transport layer, we have things like the TCP and UDP. We have the ports. This is where we have the ports, communication. In the network layer, we have the thing, protocols and things like the ICMP. When we talk about internet protocol, when you talk about IP addressing, when you're talking about pinging, these are things that are happening on the network layer. Then in data link layer, we have the Ethernet, the network interface cards on your system. This is where we have MAC addresses, and then so these are the level of communication that happen on the data link layer. And then the physical layer, we have frame relays. We have things like the Cat5, cables. We have like the fiber optics. We have like your Wi-Fi protocols. These are all happening, and these are the ways in which data, is being made use of. That's why I called it a use case. So data is being used by applications like browsers and Skype, under the application. And then we have the three layers: application, presentation, session layer. They are all directly having what we call data. So the units are referred to. Data units are referred to as data. Then we have the transport layer. We have what we call the segments. Data are broken down into what we call segments. In network layer, the data is referred to as packets, which is being sent over the internet. Then in data lake layer, we have frames. Frames are being shared over the internet, links. And then in the physical layer, we have bits, which is the ones and zeros that you come across. Then the data flow. So what actually happens when you sit down behind your system and you start to communicate? So the application layer creates data and provides service to the user. So when you have your Outlook or you have your Gmail, you as a user, you sit down behind your computer, you compose a message, or you design a flyer, or you created a video. So this is the application. The application does that for you. So it helps you in creation of data. Then we have the presentation layer. So at the presentation layer, the computer formats and encrypts this data that you have created in the application layer, so that it can be shared, or it can be sent, or it can be useful by the computer. The computer will not be interpreting data as an image that you are seeing, or as a video you are seeing. It will encrypt it in a particular format, and that is where we have things like the JPEG and the MPEG. These are the format and the encryption. So when the presentation, you know, when the data is being presented in that particular, a session is established. So what happens during the session is because is devices, it's like devices get the attention of one another. So when you want to communicate to someone, you first of all have to establish a link between you and the person. If I have someone in another room and the first thing I do is to knock on the door. The person opens the door, then I begin to speak. So when the door opens, it's like the session has been established. So the session layer is responsible for establishing a session and make use of things like the session ID. This is where we talk about the handshake between the sender and the receiver. Then we move next to the transport layer. So when the session is established, transport cannot happen. That means communication cannot happen. So when we, in this case, we have, or this is where we make use of the ports addressing. So we have port 80, port, one four one. We can have port 8080. We have so many ports that are dedicated to different kind of communication. For example, we have the FTP. When you are making use of FTP, we have like port 21. We are establishing a session. We have port 22. So we have different ports that are responsible for transporting or communicating or sending data to the receiver. Remember, after a session has been established, then we have a transport layer wherein data is being actually transported. Then we have a network layer. So when data is being transported at the network layer, this data is put, which is segments in the transport layer, is now converted into packets and then sent to destination. So this is necessary when you are sending data to a different network over the internet, over a very wide area. Data network layer is where routing happens. So data in form of packet is being routed to the network where the data is being sent to. So we can have several network, like we know. We have several network of computers on the internet. So, and this each network have an address, which is the IP address. So network layer is responsible for sending or routing the data to the right network. After the network layer, we have the data link layer. So when the data arrives at the right network, the data link layer is where the frames, the packets are framed, are sent to a local area network, using MAC address. So devices on the local area network have what we call the MAC address, and then these packets from the network layer are broken down into frames and sent to the respective devices on the network, and then the devices now transmit to the actual devices on which the user of the devices exist. What I mean by that is, like, for example, there may be 10 devices on the network. I may have my laptop, I may have my mobile phones, I may have my other IoT devices that are being configured to share the same network. So the physical layer establish a connection directly with the LAN. So either by means of your cable, like I mentioned earlier, you can have your Cat5 cable that is connecting your laptop to the LAN, or your Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, which is connecting your mobile device. So frames physical layer is where these frames are converted into bits and sent directly into your device. And then we have a reverse of what we have been talking about, which means like when it gets into the device, then the presentation, the application now also decodes it and interprets it to the user on the other end. So this is basically what happens when between the sender and the receiver on a network. This is a summary of what networking happens. And at every point of these layers, we have the cybersecurity ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability, ensuring that the transport layer is not disconnected from the network layer, ensuring that the network layer is not disconnected from the data link layer, and ensuring that the communication happening between the transport layer or between the network layer are all secure, they are not compromised, they are not altered, and ensuring that they are always available every time. So this is how cybersecurity relates to networking, and it is essential for every cybersecurity expert to make sure that they understand this principle and then it is well effected. Thank you once again.